Did you know that more than 80% of manual drivers make mistakes without realizing it? And that these habits can cause serious wear and tear on their cars? You might be guilty of some of these too. From bad clutch habits to improper shifting techniques, these small mistakes could be costing you more than you think. In today's video, we're covering 10 things you should never do when driving a manual car. And be sure to stick around until the end. I've got a bonus tip that could help you avoid costly repairs and keep your car running smoothly for years to come. First up, don't rest your foot on the clutch pedal while driving. It might seem like a harmless habit, but it can cause premature wear on some of the most important parts of your transmission system. This is known as clutch riding, and many drivers do it unknowingly, either out of habit or because they think it allows for quicker shifting. The problem is that even a slight amount of pressure on the clutch pedal prevents the clutch from fully engaging. When the clutch is not fully engaged, it allows for slight slippage between the clutch disc and the flywheel. Over time, this constant slippage leads to excessive heat and wear on the clutch friction material. Eventually, this can cause the clutch to slip even when you don't want it to, resulting in a loss of power and inefficient acceleration. Another issue is the extra strain placed on the throwout bearing. This small but critical component is responsible for disengaging the clutch when you press the pedal. When you rest your foot on the clutch, the throwout bearing remains engaged, even if only slightly. The constant contact causes unnecessary wear and can eventually lead to complete failure. A worn-out throwout bearing can create a squeaking or grinding noise when you press the clutch pedal, and replacing it requires removing the entire transmission, making it a costly repair. To avoid this problem, always keep your foot completely off the clutch pedal unless you are actively shifting gears. If you're in stop-and-go traffic or frequently shifting, make it a habit to rest your foot on the dead pedal or the floor instead of keeping it lightly pressed on the clutch. This simple adjustment can significantly extend the lifespan of your clutch and prevent unnecessary repair costs. Coming up next is the misconception of many manual drivers to use the clutch to balance the car on an incline, thinking it's an easy way to prevent rolling back. Instead of using the handbrake or holding the brake pedal, they feather the clutch and throttle to keep the car stationary. While this technique may seem convenient, it is one of the quickest ways to wear out your clutch. The clutch in a manual transmission vehicle works by creating friction between the clutch disc and the flywheel. When you partially engage the clutch to hold the car on a hill, you are allowing these two components to slip against each other. The friction generates excessive heat, which can wear down the clutch disc's material much faster than normal. Over time, this causes the clutch to lose grip, making it harder for your car to engage gears properly. Another risk of using the clutch to hold your car on a hill is that it creates unnecessary strain on the pressure plate and throwout bearing. Both of these parts are designed to engage and disengage quickly, not to be held in a partially engaged state for extended periods. If they wear out prematurely, you may notice difficulty shifting, a burning smell from the clutch, or even complete clutch failure. The correct way to prevent rolling back on a hill is to use the handbrake. Here's the best method. When you come to a stop on an incline, pull the handbrake up and keep your foot off the clutch. When it's time to move again, release the clutch slowly while applying throttle, and once you feel the car starting to pull forward, release the handbrake. This technique allows for a smooth takeoff without excessive clutch wear. Some newer manual transmission vehicles come with a hill start assist feature that briefly holds the brakes when you release the clutch, preventing rollback. If your car has this feature, it's a great alternative to the handbrake method. However, in cars without hill start assist, the handbrake is still the best way to protect your clutch. Next up is one of the most common mistakes manual drivers make is keeping the clutch pedal pressed while waiting at a stoplight. Many drivers do this because they believe it saves time when the light turns green, allowing them to move quickly. However, holding the clutch down unnecessarily is one of the easiest ways to wear out critical transmission components. When you press the clutch pedal, it engages the throwout bearing, a small but crucial part of the clutch system. The throwout bearing is designed to engage briefly when shifting, but keeping it pressed for an extended period at a stoplight means it remains under constant pressure. Over time, this additional strain can cause premature wear, leading to expensive repairs. A worn-out throwout bearing often produces a squeaking or grinding noise when the clutch is pressed, and in severe cases it can fail completely, requiring a full clutch replacement. Another issue with keeping the clutch engaged at a stoplight is the unnecessary stress it places on the diaphragm spring, which holds the clutch disc against the flywheel. This spring is designed to engage and disengage quickly, but not to remain compressed for long durations. When constantly engaged, the spring weakens, reducing its ability to properly engage the clutch, which may result in a slipping clutch over time. The correct approach when stopping at a red light is to shift the transmission into neutral and take your foot off the clutch. This prevents excessive wear and allows the clutch components to rest. Some drivers argue that keeping the car in gear allows for a faster reaction if needed, but in reality, shifting into gear when the light changes only takes a fraction of a second. Additionally, your foot should already be on the brake, so if an emergency situation arises, you can react just as quickly. On the fourth point, a common habit among manual drivers is resting their hand on the gear shift while driving. It might feel convenient, especially during long drives, but keeping your hand on the shifter can lead to premature wear on transmission components. The gear shift is connected to the selector fork inside the transmission, which moves gears into place when you shift. Applying even slight pressure on the gear shift can press the selector fork against the rotating collar inside the gearbox, leading to unnecessary friction and wear. The selector fork is not designed to be under continuous pressure. Its purpose is to briefly engage gears when shifting, not to sustain prolonged contact with the gear collar. When drivers rest their hand on the gear shift, even if only lightly, it creates a continuous force on the selector fork, causing it to wear out faster than intended. Over time, this can lead to difficulty shifting gears as worn selector forks may not engage smoothly. Another reason why resting your hand on the gear shift is a bad habit is that it reduces control over the vehicle. Keeping both hands on the steering wheel provides better stability, especially in sudden driving situations. A two-handed grip on the wheel allows for quicker reaction times, making it easier to steer in case of an emergency. To avoid this problem, shift gears when necessary and immediately return your hand to the steering wheel. If you frequently find yourself resting your hand on the gear shift, try to be more mindful of keeping both hands on the wheel. This small change can protect your transmission from unnecessary wear and improve your overall driving safety. Another common error drivers make: shifting gears at the wrong RPM can put unnecessary strain on both the engine and transmission. Some drivers shift too early while others shift too late, and both habits can lead to mechanical issues over time. When you shift gears too early, meaning at a very low RPM, the engine struggles to generate enough power to accelerate efficiently. This is known as engine lugging, and it puts excessive strain on the drivetrain. The engine works harder than necessary, which leads to increased fuel consumption and uneven power delivery. A car that is lugging may vibrate or feel sluggish as the engine is not operating within its optimal power band. On the other hand, shifting too late, meaning at a high RPM, causes excessive engine wear. Running the engine at high RPM for extended periods puts unnecessary stress on internal components such as the pistons, connecting rods, and crankshaft. While high RPM shifting is sometimes necessary for performance driving, doing it unnecessarily can lead to overheating, increased oil consumption, and long-term wear on the engine. To shift gears correctly, it's important to understand your car's power band. In most manual transmission vehicles, an optimal shift point for regular driving is between 2,000 and 3,000 RPM, depending on the engine and driving conditions. Higher performance cars may have a broader range, but for fuel efficiency and longevity, shifting within the recommended range is best. Another useful technique to ensure smoother shifts is rev matching. Rev matching involves slightly increasing engine RPM when downshifting, so that the engine speed matches the lower gear's requirements. This reduces drivetrain shock and makes for a much smoother transition. Shifting at the right RPM not only improves driving efficiency, but also helps extend the lifespan of your engine and transmission. Making a habit of shifting properly will ensure that your vehicle runs smoothly for years to come. Up next is the skipping gears while driving a manual transmission vehicle. This is a technique that some drivers use to reduce the number of shifts they need to make. For example, instead of shifting sequentially from fourth to third to second, a driver might shift directly from fourth to second. While skipping gears can be done correctly, Doing it without proper rev matching can cause excessive wear on the transmission and lead to jerky, unbalanced shifts. Rev matching is the process of adjusting engine speed to match the new gear before engaging the clutch. When downshifting, the engine needs to be at a higher RPM to match the lower gear. If the driver does not rev match, the sudden difference in engine speed and wheel speed creates a shock through the drivetrain. This strain affects the clutch, the gearbox, and the synchronizers, which are responsible for smoothly engaging gears. When a driver skips gears without rev matching, the synchronizers must work harder to equalize the difference in speed. Over time, this additional strain can wear out the synchronizers, making shifting feel rough and less precise. Worn synchronizers can also lead to gear grinding and difficulty engaging gears, which are common signs of transmission wear. To skip gears correctly, always use rev matching. If you're downshifting from fourth to second, briefly tap the throttle before releasing the clutch to bring the engine speed up to match the lower gear. This technique helps avoid drivetrain shock and reduces wear on the transmission. Another important factor to consider is road speed. Skipping gears works best when done within the appropriate speed range for the selected gear. Dropping into too low of a gear at high speeds can cause unnecessary strain on the engine and increase fuel consumption. Skipping gears can be useful in some situations, such as when slowing down for a turn or accelerating quickly. However, it should always be done with rev matching to ensure a smooth transition. Now that we've covered the importance of rev matching when skipping gears, let's talk about another mistake that many manual drivers make. Another crucial mistake many drivers overlook is lugging the engine occurs when a driver stays in a high gear while driving at low speeds, forcing the engine to work harder than necessary. This happens when the car is in a gear that is too high for the current road speed, making acceleration slow and unresponsive. Many drivers make this mistake unknowingly, thinking that keeping the engine at low RPM is good for fuel economy. However, lugging the engine puts excessive strain on internal components and can lead to long-term damage. When the engine is lugging, it struggles to maintain enough power to move the vehicle efficiently. The pistons, crankshaft, and connecting rods experience higher than normal loads, which increases wear on the engine. Additionally, the fuel mixture inside the cylinders does not burn as efficiently, which can lead to increased carbon buildup over time. Another issue with lugging the engine is that it affects the transmission and drivetrain. The drivetrain components, including the clutch and gearbox, experience unnecessary vibrations due to the engine's struggle to maintain power. Over time, these vibrations can cause premature wear on the clutch and transmission mounts, leading to costly repairs. To avoid lugging, always shift to a lower gear when the engine feels sluggish or unresponsive. In most manual transmission vehicles, the ideal RPM range for shifting is between 2,000 and 3,000 RPM under normal driving conditions. If the car is struggling to accelerate, or if you feel noticeable vibrations from the engine, it's a sign that you need to downshift. A good habit to develop is paying attention to the sound and feel of the engine. If the car feels underpowered or makes a deep, laboring sound, it's likely being lugged. Instead of staying in a high gear, shift down to give the engine the power it needs to move efficiently. Now that we've covered why lugging the engine is a bad habit, let's discuss another mistake that can cause stress on both the transmission and engine. A driving habit you should rethink is that downshifting is a fundamental part of driving a manual transmission vehicle. But doing it too aggressively can put unnecessary strain on the engine, clutch, and gearbox. Many drivers make the mistake of downshifting suddenly at high speeds without considering the impact on the drivetrain. When a driver downshifts too aggressively, the engine is forced to rapidly increase its RPM to match the lower gear. This sudden jump in engine speed creates a harsh shock throughout the drivetrain. The most noticeable effect is excessive engine braking, which can cause the wheels to lock up momentarily if the RPM increase is too extreme. This loss of traction is particularly dangerous on wet or slippery roads. Another issue with aggressive downshifting is the impact it has on the clutch and flywheel. When downshifting suddenly without properly matching engine speed, the clutch disc experiences a rapid change in rotational speed. This abrupt shift causes increased friction and heat, leading to premature wear on the clutch components. Over time, this can cause the clutch to slip or lose grip, making it difficult to engage gears smoothly. To avoid aggressive downshifting, always use rev matching. Before releasing the clutch after a downshift, tap the throttle slightly to increase engine speed to the appropriate level for the lower gear. This technique helps reduce the sudden shock to the drivetrain and ensures a smoother transition between gears. Another important factor to consider is road speed. If you need to downshift, make sure you are within the correct speed range for the lower gear. For example, shifting from 4th to 2nd at high speed can cause an excessive jump in RPM, while shifting from 3rd to 2nd at a lower speed will create a much smoother transition. Smooth downshifting is especially important in situations where traction is crucial, such as when driving in wet or icy conditions. A sudden downshift can cause a loss of control if the wheels suddenly slow down due to excessive engine braking. By practicing controlled downshifting and using rev matching, you can improve the longevity of your clutch and transmission while maintaining better control over your vehicle. An often overlooked mistake is coasting in neutral that many manual transmission drivers make, often without realizing its negative effects on the vehicle. This habit occurs when drivers leave their car in neutral while going downhill or approaching a stop, thinking it will save fuel or make the car coast more smoothly. However, coasting in neutral can actually be harmful to the car and can reduce your control over the vehicle. When you shift into neutral, you disengage the engine from the wheels. This means you no longer have the benefit of engine braking, which can help slow the vehicle down. Engine braking is an important feature of manual transmission vehicles, as it uses the engine's compression to decelerate the car, reducing the reliance on the brake system. Without this feature, you may have to apply the brakes more heavily, increasing the wear on your brake pads and making it harder to maintain control. Another issue with coasting in neutral is that it reduces your ability to quickly react in an emergency. When the car is in gear, you have the ability to accelerate instantly if needed, allowing for faster responses in sudden situations, such as avoiding an obstacle. In neutral, however, you lose that immediate power transfer, which could delay your reaction time and potentially increase the risk of an accident. To avoid this problem, always keep your car in gear while coasting downhill or when approaching a stop. You'll maintain better control over the vehicle and reduce wear on your brake components. If you need to slow down, simply downshift to a lower gear, allowing the engine to assist with braking. Coasting in neutral may seem like a good idea in theory, but it actually works against both the safety of the driver and the health of the car. Now that we've covered coasting, let's move on to the final mistake that many manual drivers make. Lastly, shifting at high speeds without considering the condition of your engine and transmission is a mistake that can cause significant long-term damage to your vehicle. Many drivers, especially those new to manual transmissions, often shift abruptly or incorrectly, causing undue stress on the transmission system and engine. This habit is common when drivers shift quickly, trying to accelerate or decelerate in a hurry, without considering the impact it has on the mechanical components. When you shift at high speeds without taking the necessary precautions, you put excessive stress on the gears and synchros in your transmission. The synchros are responsible for ensuring smooth engagement of gears, but when forced to shift too quickly, they cannot operate properly. This causes jerky shifts, which can lead to gear grinding and eventually the failure of the synchronizers. Repairing or replacing the synchros can be an expensive job as it often requires removing the transmission. Furthermore, shifting at high speeds can put excessive strain on the engine. At high RPMs, the engine is already working hard, and shifting abruptly can cause components such as the crankshaft, pistons, and valves to endure excessive pressure. This can lead to engine wear and even damage over time. To avoid this, it's important to always be mindful of your speed and RPM when shifting. Shifting too aggressively can lead to damaged gears, a worn-out transmission, and an overworked engine. If you're in a higher gear and need to accelerate quickly, downshifting smoothly and gradually is the best option. This allows the engine to match the correct speed for the gear, reducing strain on the entire system. Shifting at high speeds should always be done with care, and making sure you're within the recommended RPM range for each gear is essential to protect your vehicle from unnecessary damage. When you shift too quickly or abruptly at high speeds, it places undue stress on the transmission and engine components, including the gears, synchros, and even the clutch. This increased strain can lead to a decrease in performance, rough shifting, and in the long term, premature wear on critical parts. With that, we have reached the end of today's video. If you have come this far with us, be sure to check out other videos on the channel.